Yo, 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 what is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today, do I have a hot, spicy wonton soup edition of Drama Llama for you. Coming to you from Kingdom 65, there is some intensity, some chaos that's been happening over the past couple days, and we're going to break everything down for you. I got screenshots that have been sent to me from both sides of the DS and then the non-DS side. And the summary of what we're going to be showing you is that TO, one of the alliances in 65, ended up going and looking to form some unions or allies with other kingdoms that are most likely going to be within their KVK group coming up for Season 1+. DS got wind of this and decided, hey, we're going to attack and start limiting the capabilities of TO going into Season 1+. Now, there's a lot that we're going to be showing you. I'm going to give you my thoughts and my opinions on it. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about kind of how this came to pass, why it came to pass, and really kind of talking about I want to say extracurriculars, the intangibles, right? So I'll be doing that at the end to kind of give you my view on the DS side, and I'll give you my view on the non-DS side, and then we'll give you a nice little conclusion at the end. So let's dive into the first one here, which we have. Now, these are some screenshots that I'm going to show you from 62 and I think 63, where Bob, the second strongest player in 65, is, and I'll show you that real quick so you guys can just have some context there. So we'll go here, power, so PV Bob right here, number 2, just to show you that. So now we'll go back, and you'll see this is Bob going into one of the other kingdoms that could supposedly be in their group, where he says, "Hello, little children, MIR, I declare war on you. Death Squad ready for you. XT, this is crazy. Bob Clucks. Come talk on our server." Again, obviously not the kindest language. Then we get to another kingdom. True, you can see different name here. Lubu, I came to offer you my Kermit. Please accept. Not sure really what that's about. We'll leave Bob to his own vernaculars, if you will. And then we have server 63 RIP. This is in 63. I guess, lol, I just went over there to troll a bit. They follow a guy named Lou. And then he showed the screenshot here. Created war. I'm good at this. And then kind of gives a laughing emoji from what you can see. We get over here to the next screenshot. And let me point out before we talk about this one is, I mean, this has kind of been Bob's MO, more or less, right? This is the thing to understand about some players who spend money, is that you have to understand that when they are spending, the idea is to try and get to the end game as fast as possible, / just get ahead overall. So once you're in that position, you can then go out and start fighting in PvP, because what else do you really have left at that point when you've kind of maxed your account out? You've hit T5, your VIP 15, your max academy, you're in a max tech alliance. There's not necessarily, right, you have max skilled out your heroes. It's almost kind of like you did this no rush style gameplay, all this prep, so you could kind of have the maxed out account in some regards to then go out and start using it. So it kind of makes sense when you think about the fact that they're kind of at this stage, when you look at it internally within the kingdom for things that happen, whether it was Bob being ahead or some other people being ahead, and or once you kind of get up to that max account status. So then we see another screenshot here from Z's. This is Kratos, the number 1 player in the kingdom currently. He says, guys, Season 2, I won't follow any peace. We will go there to win with full force. Now, I want to point out that this screenshot obviously does not indicate and tell us what happened before or after this. However, if I'm looking at this at face value based on the tendency and the consistent trends or the historical references of what I've seen from Kratos / Z's, is that it is pretty clear that DS is okay with making declarations or announcements without necessarily involving others in those decisions, especially when there's logic that's been applied. If you think about the diplomacy conversation that I shared a while ago, where it was me, Blue, and HQ and Z's that were talking, along with, I think Croc and Scott was in there, Chisada was in there, and then eventually Barco joined as well. And you heard me make the points that I did, which you really couldn't disagree with it, right, based on the evidence and the logic and rationale that I provided. But you still ended up seeing, even though, and they agreed with it, but still kind of opted to go in another way, right? So this kind of lends a little bit to that, but we're going to continue looking to see if there's anything else, right? So we don't kind of put all our eggs in one basket. But this just kind of shows that, hey, he wants to fight. That's an all-in thing. So then we see another screenshot, which is the very next one. No peace at all. Rose says, yes, sir, if they want peace, they got to join us. This is from CHRM. Mitchell responds from TO, are we planning to have no allies? Right, so this is, you can tell by this comment that, excuse me, that clearly they're probably hearing this for the first time. Who knows if there was an announcement, or who knows if there was a poll that was made. I want to point out that at this time, I have not seen, and from what I have come to understand now, I've reached out to members on both sides of the camp. I have not been provided a screenshot, and no one had told me that they did a poll to vote and see what everyone wanted to do. Now, maybe that did happen and maybe it didn't happen, but when I had asked, again, there wasn't an answer. No one was able to provide me anything. So we get to, and there will be no limit. I will hunt them even back to Zone 1. Our allies is the server. And then we get to this announcement where we say, welcome everyone. I brought everyone here to discuss the future of this server and the direction we want to go as a group. Many things have happened since we all joined S65. Remember, this is on the 23rd, so we're actually talking a week and a half actually at this point. Excuse me, albeit a couple days from what I thought I said. We have fought on and off the field, broke alliances, made agreements, lost trust, gained allies. None of this matters anymore. It's not really the case, and I wouldn't have worded it that way, because that comes off as like you're just thinking that you're just going to be able to get to a fresh start, and that's just usually not the case. If we want to succeed moving forward, we have to start fresh, which is exactly what I just alluded to. It just, that doesn't always come across the best way when you're thinking about wording and tone and kind of the optics for especially people on the other side. That's just not something that you typically want to say, which is, oh, hey, let's just throw everything under the rug and start out fresh. It's just not a good look. I wouldn't have worded it like that. This means forgiving past transgressions and building this kingdom for longevity. Forgiveness is definitely something that could be done, because that's different. Building this kingdom, but again, to give forgiveness, there has to be acknowledgement, right, before that can be provided. This kingdom for longevity, I think we all want this in some way, and to figure that out, we cannot hold on to past grudges. If we feel we can do all of this, there are 3 topics I'd like to discuss. Remember, this says discuss, not we're going to do this, right? So that's important. I actually like the wording there. Creating internal peace for the server and making it a fair, playable environment while also keeping members engaged. This is somewhat broad. We need all alliances to gather information and statistics on your members. Activity of viable members is important so we can plan for Season 2. That's pretty broad and vague too as well. That should actually be more specific and more detailed. Number 3, distributing regions accordingly to aforementioned stats. Now, again, these are discussion points, but again, it would have been nice to give more details in order to then have discussion points, or even phrase that as a question of, hey, I'd love to hear when we do discuss on what ideas everyone would have. And then number 3, distributing regions accordingly to aforementioned stats. Activity of your members, we may need to fill alliances for preparation of Season 2, but to do this, we need to see where all alliances are at. We will discuss the dragon after we finish talks of basic organization of the server together. Now, I'm assuming this is something that was alluded to me from the DS side, which was that they were still in conversation, there were still talks, but not sure, but from what I have come to understand, there was nothing that was confirmed. There was nothing where everyone kind of had said, well, we all came to a conclusion, we all decided on something, and that's what we're all, basically everyone kind of fulfilled their discussions, talked everything out, and said, okay, this is the direction we're going to go in now. So from my understanding, that hadn't happened yet, even up to this point. Then we get here to the next one, which is Z's coming in. Remember, this is 2 days after, right? It says, we'll discuss Dragon after we finish talks on basic organization, right? So this was posted on the 23rd. Next post is, I apologize for my late response. I've been sick. Thank you for everyone for your input, questions, and responses. I ask if you have not responded, right? So he's confirming that, okay, a discussion had happened. Here we go. If you have not responded, so please speak with your leadership teams so we can finalize this topic and move on to other things. As far as council, we will plan each alliance to have their R5 and 2 R4s of your choosing for council. This group will discuss decisions for the kingdom together, giving you time to speak with your leadership teams directly, then vote as a group to implement. These are just basic details until we know where everyone stands, and can also be modified as we see fit. But too many people in one chat slows down decision making, so please keep this in mind. I want to point out that that entire sentence, that entire paragraph is essentially a walking contradiction. And that isn't anything negative towards these, it's just, it is what it is. You cannot say that, let me rephrase. If you say, we plan to have 3 representatives per alliance, and given that there was probably 4 to 6 alliances at that point that were active and probably considered, even though a number wasn't given here, that's just me estimating based on based on how everything looked at that time. And then you say, but keep in mind the chat slows down decision making if there's many people in the chat. So you're talking about at minimum anywhere from 12 to 18 people in a chat, right? If you just have 1 R5 from each, now you have potentially between 4 and 6, right? So especially when you're not necessarily having a head or someone that can supervise, moderate, or make final decisions if necessary, you then are going to just take more time in general because you need to have discussions first and back and forth before you can even get to votes. So to that, 12 to 18 people basically in your decision-making body or your governing body, that's just too many to me. Additionally, I have, right now, if you want to have those in like a discussion body, that's different. But in a decision-making body, again, that's just too much. Additionally, I plan to have everyone touch the dragon, so we will need to work out territory to make this happen. Also, after that, we should start arranging the PvE, PvP stuff to make the server keep alive. Again, nothing really detailed there. I'd be curious to see what that actually meant. Okay, now we get the next one, right, is Z saying this is back to the 23rd. Everyone has the right to add, objectify, or modify. Everyone here has valuable opinion. I believe that with good communication and the selection of constructive ideas, we can always make better progress. This to me is interesting because this was something that, you know, we, during the conversations and during the discussions, it is interesting because this was something that kind of, it felt to me that Z's probably thought this was the case, or at least he approached his perspective when we were having discussions where it did kind of come off like this. However, what you'll see in some later screenshots and for some things that, again, just kind of essentially show the opposite to a degree of that when it comes to kind of how it's this is the thing. You can really tell how people are when they correspond and they talk to you in a kind of non-official setting. And so you'll be seeing some of that in a bit. So then you see Kratos, this is Z's, right? This was, again, something that had happened where it appeared to be, from reports I got, that this person was attacked. Croc comes in and says, okay, so now DS zeroing people's cities like mine and no alliance. And again, you can see here that Croc at this time wasn't in the alliance because he was transitioning. This was one of the rules of the kingdom itself when they made a recent announcement. And I don't know, let me see if I could show you guys this one. I just want to make sure if I have it or not. Let me see here. Just want to make sure if they did make an announcement. I have everything, so it's... so this was Zone 1 cities without Alliance tag may be attacked. So that's what that was. And I can't see where the territory is for this one. I really wish I could. However, I want to say I do not believe that this was in Zone 1. So, again, let me just say, if that was the case, because I don't know why Croc would be in Zone 1, right? So this, to me, my assumption is this is Zone 2, Zone 3. And so let me just say that if it is the case, then, and then you see the claims here that they were attacked, they technically would be breaking their own rule at this point. So then you can see here, helping the kingdom, right? Repeat no alliance, okay, sure. And it says here, in mine and no alliance, and in Zone 2, right? So you see him saying he's in Zone 2. And bear in mind, these were rules that they all agreed to. So it's kind of them breaking their own rules. That, to me, you've at that point basically have lost all integrity at that point, especially if it's that blatant and you're someone in management and you're the one who's doing it. It just doesn't really allow for anyone to kind of believe what you are saying or going to do going forward, especially when this is not the first account or case of it. And then you see the second one, I'm in shock you did that to me, being in no alliance and not messing with anyone, but hey, that's fine. I'll watch the kingdom go up in flames. Then we get to the next one, right? This was something that was posted after an announcement that we'll probably show you here in a little bit was made, right? So this is kind of a vote. This is me alluding to what I was saying about the whole TO situation where they voted to attack TO or some people to stay neutral, right? And this was apparently, from what I understand, this vote was done after the announcement was made from DS to go ahead and attack TO. This is something that usually you would do before that, not necessarily after you've already made your declaration, right? So kind of priority there of order of events, a little miscued. And then we get, and again, we'll show you that in a moment. Then we have Asteria, who made a post here, right, saying, I think it goes without saying that since we are individual and neutral family alliances, we will need to do a meeting with our officers before coming to a decision of what we will do as a family in the coming season. We want to keep it our motto that we will stay neutral and our people are free to go wherever they wish, whether that is DSTO, UL, or any other place, and that they will always have a home in the Nature family. That is why Trip told Smarf that he is welcome to join a different alliance and the Nature family does not fit him. As we have told our players many times that we want to keep ourselves from World Chat. We are not against DS or 65. We have no doubt that DS will take the Dragon in Season 2. We started discussions. I wouldn't have said that. We started discussions for diplomacy because you're just kind of inflating them, or kind of flaming the head, if you will. We started discussions for diplomacy and other servers because in this chat, other alliances had already started doing so, but no further information was talked about. In leadership chat, it was posted that we would aim to be split into all starting regions. We are thinking to start in Frosty and looking to where other servers are going to land. For this to work, we need to the other servers. We need to talk to the servers, hence the diplomacy. And again, this is what I would consider to be a decently put kind of diplomatic message that basically allows for a level of protection by not overcommitting to one side or not, kind of using the words neutrality, individuals, using the words like, hey, we're only doing this for diplomacy because it was said we're all going to start in different alliances. Now, whether or not they had an objective or not, right, this is kind of how you would go about, I would say, wording something that is decently good for how it comes across, because it kind of puts the ball somewhat in DS's court. Now, I don't know what was said before or after this, for that matter, but this is something that, with the way this is written, this is actually okay. Then let's get into the next one. And this is actually a little bit lower in that chat. So HE responds, that is interesting, and a very diplomatic response, right? So she recognizes this as well. Says, accepted as a lie, lol. This is one of those things where if you're in a member of management, it's important to keep your head above and up high, especially while things are still ongoing and really hopefully for the most part. So adding in things like lol, it just kind of degrades the quality of your response. You have zero intention of working with DS in Season 2 and remain neutral in the hopes we will not turn on your alliance so you can make it to Season 2 to work in Sophostia with other servers. But thank you for the message, Asteria. It was a fun read. I expect the difference between EXN and TO, that TO lacks more intelligence, but in the end, the two together do not want this kingdom to succeed in any way. Again, when you're starting to kind of attack people personally and their intellect, it's a big turnoff. And that's not something that members of management or leadership should ever do. So this, to me, is a ginormous red flag. And again, I don't know if other people, because you have to think about it like this. If you're in DS right now, you are basically co-signing what these people are saying, right? Now, it doesn't mean that you necessarily agree or you disagree with it. But when you see things like this come to light and the way that your leader and your management team is operating and the way that they talk to people, and you still decide to stay in those alliances and basically giving kind of this passive okay or sign off, it's hard, especially when these things are done. Now, bear in mind, this isn't even though this is in somewhat of a different chat. These are things that I've seen these players or these individuals say publicly before, or say varied versions of these things publicly. So it's a hard pill to swallow. Then we say we offered both all opportunities to do so. Instead, they either plot behind everyone's back or make their own plans and say, here we have none, even though we said we must get 65 sorted first. It is funny, really, let's unite the server and agree to it to buy time to scheme instead of using the time to build the server. Very well executed by both. And again, we're actually going to come back and talk about this one in a bit. Then we get to the next one here, which is Z's posting a Dumb and Dumber. Again, right, just kind of taking stabs, insulting people directly. I mean, it's not a good look, right? I mean, if like this is not someone, in my opinion, who should be in a leadership position if you're acting in this way. I'm sure Z's might be a nice person personally, but when you're talking about in-game and the business side of things or the management side of things, it's not a good look. HQ, don't worry, this will be our fault. Z's, I can't wait to see the messages. Trip, I have morals. Also, Trip, I lie about uniting the kingdom, working with DS to better the server, and use them as free ride for as long as I could. Again, taking stabs. Then we get into another chat here, which is post screenshot says DS loves these. Lol, you the boss, my man. Can't post screenshot more. So basically, DS is going to wipe this alliance completely. So we just have to bubble and wait. Sounds really fun. Love it. And this is basically them in world chat talking about how it seems as though they're going to go ahead and attack them. It's kind of alluded to in the previous screenshots that we showed you as well. Please tell your members that don't want to get involved to shield up. EXN, we don't want to burn anyone that isn't involved in treason. That's most of this alliance. Yeah. So bear in mind, this is the thing to understand, is that by extension, it does not necessarily mean that the players signed off on this so-called treason, right? Remember, these things typically start with management and leadership when it comes to them reaching out to other kingdoms. We're talking about the diplomacy side of things, right? So that's kind of really what it is. This isn't something that you would necessarily kind of go out of your way to like punish players that essentially had nothing to do with it. And I'm talking where you're actually going and attacking these people, not just saying things about them publicly. And then we get to a message that was posted from what I'm assuming, in either the Outlaws Discord or something. This is an announcement. Where Mitcha says, hey guys, as the main architect of these diplomatic chats with other kingdoms, I wanted to make a personalized announcement to Outlaws. It is unfortunate the plans have leaked, and we're currently in full war with DS. Sorry to have kept you all in the dark, but it is absolutely required for these types of discussions. We have secured 2 strong kingdoms so far to help us in our war against DS in Season 2. The R4 of one alliance, and one of them has betrayed us and will be burned for it by their king. DS currently is planning to go into Season 2 with absolutely no plan. They want to 1v4, and we've hardly even discussed any strategy. This decision was not discussed or voted on. This council rule that is spoken of is basically a sham in which DS makes all decisions, and we learn them after the fact. Bob woke up one day and created an account in 62 and 63 to insult their entire kingdoms and R5s by calling them, as you heard, and fully declared war on them on behalf of 65. Some of those we did technically see happen. It goes without saying that we have no real interest to play with DS in the long term and are looking to migrate out of 65 as soon as possible for 5k gems at the end of Season 2. In Season 2, we will not be going into the same zone region as DS and will fully cut ties with them to fight them later on in the zone in-zone progression. Feel free to stay in Outlaws and fight, be a target, or leave and find temporary shelter until the end of the season. Our territory will be burned, and DS will have only saved the servers some processing power, as they will inevitably be deleted in 2 weeks. Do not get city hit, do not defend passes, but if you're willing to follow your leadership into a new kingdom in Season 2, please fill in this survey. Mitch says, I have not betrayed 65. DS did it by making this place totally unlivable. My loyalty is to you and nobody else. I will always look out for the best interest of all Outlaw members, which is why I want to greet you in a healthy kingdom very soon. I hope I have enacted the will of our alliance long term by designing a solid plan to get us out of 65 and find a welcoming refuge in another kingdom with true peace, cooperation, and council rule. If you do not share my vision for the future, leave and join DS permanently. Some cry emojis. So a little bit to unpack here. I'm not going to spend too much time because we're already kind of coming up at 24 minutes. But I want to say that in this, again, I've known Mitra for a while. Mitra has been in, I think, 1 or 2 of my projects previously, and I think at least. And so, and it's funny because I had this conversation with Mitra kind of at the end of the town hall meeting where there were some choice words that were said by him to me. Since then, we've chatted a little bit. He has actually apologized to me for how things went down and for what he said. And this was in DMs, and I'm not going to show that. But, I can always appreciate when people have any level of self-awareness. And, part of it for some players is that, sometimes they're making claims or making statements based on limited information. And, for me, when I did my big town hall, it was to show enough of information, enough screenshots, enough evidence, so that way people would have a little bit more of an understanding for just how things went, right? It was never to say, hey, these individuals are awful and they're completely bad. It was to shed some light on how things were actually developing from the beginning up until the kind of culmination of the explosion, or the kind of straw that broke the camel's back, as some of them would say. So from here, right, I think with DS planning to go into Season 2 with no plan, again, obviously, I can't say if that's the case or not. If it comes to me speculating based on my interactions with DS thus far, it would appear that, I'm not going to say that it doesn't really come off that they don't have a plan. I would just say that it comes off as though there's a very entry-level idea of what they would like to do, and then at times they will typically go and ask their player base, especially when, in my view, it's more of things that your management team and your leadership team should be deciding. Even if you're just asking people for their opinions and feedback, which you don't necessarily always have to do for specific types of decisions, because the hope is that they should be following you and know what your decisions are, right? Like, they should know what direction you want to go in, and they should be on board with that, to the point of where you don't really need to go and ask them for opinions or thoughts, because they should already have signed up to be on board with what you're doing. The fact is that usually you're going and asking those things when you're in situations where they don't know, or you don't know how they're going to respond, or if they really joined you for the right reasons. That's just my view on that. Right, it goes without saying there's no real long term for DS, and again, we'll talk about that in a little bit, because I think that's actually an interesting point. And then you end up having, right, people saying to leave, and bear in mind, this is probably the smart thing to do, is that, look, if you're already kind of in this situation, just tell everyone to leave. I mean, what is DS and their group going to be able to do? Like, are they going to tag everyone's name and keep a spreadsheet and log where everyone's going, and basically individually weed people out one by one by one? That's a lot of work. So really, if you think about it, it's smart. Just kind of hide in the shadows, or hide amongst DS or their allies. And, even if all of those people leave and go and join other alliances in Season 2 from other kingdoms, or they go and reform alliances and then do their unions with other alliances from other kingdoms, there's nothing really DS can do to stop that. I mean, if you logically think about it, everyone who was previously in NASTi family, if they feel this way about DS, they technically could all just leave DS, go and reform their alliances in Season 2, ally and partner up with other kingdoms' alliances, and then fight against DS, right? That is something they could technically do. Then we'll get to this one here, which is, and this might be a little bit hard to read, but this one basically says, DS has fully declared war. This is kind of the next lines, I believe. On Outlaws, do not farm in Zone 3, be mindful. Carver says, I want to apologize to you all for the chaos I've caused. After our last meeting, I started reaching out to other servers to find a place for TO to migrate to. We got into contact with Server 62. Talks proceeded nicely, but they also didn't like what DS did in 65, so we agreed to become allies in Season 2 and migrate thereafter. All this was going on without informing you to prevent it from leaking, which is normal, right? Typically, you wouldn't necessarily mention these types of things to the player base until it kind of becomes more of an appropriate time, and then you're kind of giving them doses of it until you eventually tell them everything. But one of the top two alliances in 62 leaked it. So embarrassed that this happened. I have my reasons, but my reason doesn't justify hiding this from you. I wouldn't have said this. There's just no reason to say that. You've kind of already given your explanation above. This is just kind of not to say that it would make you look incompetent, but it's just not something that you do, because it just can give a more negative light on the situation for your decision making. You don't want to necessarily do the undermining work for anyone else in that case. The best option for you all is to leave TO65, and those of the TO tag are the target. And again, this could have been, I think, worded a little bit better overall. So now what we're going to do is I'm just going to briefly talk about what I think is probably the big important piece here, is kind of how did everything come to where we are at currently, right? And the challenge here is that you have a situation in which you are overall looking at kind of a lot that has happened in these kingdoms, or I should say in the kingdom. And the challenge really at this point is that DS overall, and let me talk about the DS side, then I'm going to talk about the TO side. So when it comes to DS, they kind of, they kind of laid their own bed at this point, right? You kind of laid your own coffin, so to speak. The challenge is that when you go through doing what you did it in a way that did not home grow anything, right? Remember, you have to think about, how did the NASTi family come in? How does any project come into a kingdom? Well, they come in with months of prep, which we did, reiterating our goals and our expectations and our standard to all the players there over a consistent period of time, and then coming in with a mindset and approach to what we're going to do. Right? It was said early on that DS did not do that. They just kind of joined whatever server was up when their small group went in, which I think was about 15 to 20 players from what they initially said, but they didn't have a game plan. So you have to look at it from, you have a group with 9 alliances, 350 to 400 players that are organized, prepped, they have a foundation, they have a game plan, and then you have 15 to 20 people that don't have a game plan at all. And then they kind of grow and grow and grow, right? There's cross-recruiting that's happening where they're trying to recruit some strong players. Eventually, they decide they're just going to go be their own alliance. They're messaging top players in the kingdom, and they're basically just taking a standard mega alliance approach, which is, hey, I'm the number one player in the kingdom, or I'm growing in power currently, and we want you to come and join. Our plan is just to be the number one alliance. We're just going to take the dragon, or we'll take the best of the best stuff. I mean, this is kind of an age-old tale that just happens and can be consistent, or can happen often. And so it wasn't like they did anything new. This is pretty standard. However, the challenge is that, some of the players that maybe weren't a part of my projects before previously, you ended up seeing some of those people going over after a period of time. And then it just kind of started slowly snowballing. And you start getting more and more players that are joining over. And eventually it becomes just this small group to kind of this, small alliance or small worthy alliance at that point. And then that's where you got some of the fighting that happened. But you have to understand that all of those things that happened were done in a way where they were trying to fight their way up from just a smaller position when everything initially started, right? They didn't have an infrastructure. They didn't have a game plan. So you have to look at it as they're kind of in a way trying to undermine and basically destroy or break what currently does exist, right? Like, you're basically trying to say, well, we're just kind of this roguish faction because we don't really have any type of game plan or any type of long-term vision. And we're talking about early on at the time, from what we understood, is that they didn't. And so this all happens, and then you eventually get to a point where the pressure that's being applied externally, and then mainly what's happening internally, is factoring into kind of the group's demise, if you will. And obviously the big one that we talk about is the fact that the 6 or 7 leads at the time basically chose the worst option of the 2 options that they had, which was, right, we at that point, we had never shown any disloyalty or distrust in boss in any decision making. We never said anything publicly, but we're still going to opt and basically just leave the project because they didn't agree, however many did, with a decision that was made, instead of believing the best in someone when they have never done anything to show you otherwise, and saying, hey, let's give boss an opportunity to explain. Let's wait until we can set up a meeting the next day and we can all talk about it. Instead, you see that an impulsive decision was made from their side to leave, and now you're kind of basically you're in a disarray at this point, right? It's kind of almost like a free-for-all. Everything's kind of up for grabs, because now you have to basically either have someone who's going to lead that group, or you have to have a strong enough combined leadership to where everyone is truly on the same page. And when you've left the person that is basically the glue, that I've been told multiple times by some of the leads is kind of holding everything together, it makes it very difficult to kind of leave a situation where you have basically a level of stability, and you're then going into this sphere of uncertainty. And so you then look at how DS plays into that. And at that point, once they left, now it's okay, well, DS can kind of just pick apart these individual alliances and talk to them one-on-one and say, well, hey, do you want to ally? Do you want to join? They can do the same thing and go to DS and say, hey, we'd like to ally, or we'd like to join the family. And bear in mind, DS is now getting an influx, not only, I'm sure, of players, but now also potential alliances that they were able to get control of. And their simple approach, which is pretty standard in most of these cases when you don't necessarily kind of have a long-term game plan, is, well, let's just go ahead and rebrand them. and make them DS family. This is kind of the first big notice, or I should say an additional big notice, that to me just shows kind of a general lack of experience when it comes to these things, right? They're kind of playing the age-old, well, let's just brand them under the umbrella and hope that that's going to kind of get them on our side. It actually would have been better for them to take a stronger, more challenging road where they said, look, we don't want you to join. We want you to see what we're about first. We want to work with you as an independent alliance. And if you like what we're about throughout our time being spent together, and then you eventually decide to join the family, cool. But that really should have been the approach. And that was one of the missteps by them not recognizing this, and most likely because they probably haven't built or been a part of big kingdom projects and have done that from the ground up. As we know, they don't have a lot of experience when we're talking about specifically their management team. As we know, they were playing Top War in the number one kingdom there, 770, I believe, for a while. And they specifically told us that they did not have a lot of traditional kingdom builder experience. So you have to factor in all of these things. That kind of culminates to this point of things boil over. They're picking up players, they're picking up alliances, and they're trying to kind of form this pseudo government of a council, when you have to bear in mind that they were not, and this is probably the second misstep, is they were not self-aware enough to understand that specifically the management team there within DS did not understand, or again, I don't know, maybe it was just oblivious to this, which I'm shocked. Because I wouldn't have expected that. More so probably from HQ than the others, and that's because I've talked to her more. But to not recognize that, look, you are not their first choice. That's just a fact. You're not the management's first choice. And for the majority of the players, if they could decide freely, without any form of repercussions, who they wanted to play with, if it was going to be the NASTi family or DS, right, the majority of people would choose the NASTi family. Especially even if you ask them now at this point when it comes to, well, look at how things have happened. Things were not like that when Boss was there and we were doing everything that we were. But now you look at the situation now, and just to kind of give you an example, and this isn't me tooting my own horn, this is just stating facts for facts, is look at the alliances. You have basically two heavy alliances right now that are DSO, DS2, and then you have DS1. UL has kind of been a neutral alliance for a while, but you basically have gone from having, 10, 12 healthy active alliances, 12 and more, right? 12 to 15 at one point, and now you basically have 5, right? Maybe 6 if you still want to include Sorp there. And I would, it's because I'm still in the alliance hanging out, so thanks, Sally. Right, but I mean, ultimately, right, you have all the other alliances, TO, RXN, EXN, right? Again, all super low power. Everyone's just kind of funneling up. But because of this, you have kind of one alliance, which is the main, that's kind of going along this mega alliance approach. And then you have a second that's kind of reigning in there. And then UL is just kind of neutral, not really aligned with anyone. So again, these are things to think about when you're looking at kind of where the kingdom was versus now they're just kind of trending in a standard typical mega alliance structured kingdom, right? Where basically everyone's kind of going along the Darwinism effect and trying to climb the ladder. And this is pretty standard for what happens in basically every kingdom, unless you have some type of outside influence or some type of policies or processes to kind of combat or go against that grain. And so, let me talk about the TO side. On the TO side now, right, it's, look, you always have that chance. If you go out, and this is pretty standard, right, things can get leaked, and if you go out and try and do alliance diplomatic discussions, especially when you're in a situation like you are, again, I don't know who they talk to, how many people they talk to, but what I would say is that sometimes you want to keep that close to the chest. You might only reach out to a leader, as an example, or whoever the king person is, or an R5. And maybe you start off by reaching out to one person, or maybe 2 at the most, and then you kind of go from there. But bear in mind, if they end up telling people, that's kind of out of your control, right? Maybe the expectation was, we're just going to keep this tight knit, but maybe they told other people and that's how it leaked. Maybe they were already including multiple people and that wasn't something that was discussed in the beginning of Mitch or whomever else saying, look, we just want to keep this to like 1 or 2 people for now, and just kind of keep it broad and vague. So there's some unknown there that we can't really attest to. But that's kind of my general advice typically when you go about doing those situations, especially when you're in this type of a hostile kingdom, but at least a hostile environment that I should say 65 is in. So this is to all say, in my conclusion now, because I'm almost at 40 minutes, is I think when you look at everything in its entirety, the challenge is that you kind of see DS going along this type of TA type approach, right? Which it's we're just going to kind of run this traditional mega alliance structure, and that's what our alliance is going to be. And it's very easy for people to kind of feed into that narrative. Bear in mind, it doesn't really matter that it's DS. It could be any alliance. It could be any leadership. It could be anyone's name. When you simply have the number one alliance, it attracts certain types of players. And usually those types of players are spenders, and they're people that want to just be a part of the top alliance, whether it's for gold chests, whether it's because they think they're going to be able to go ahead and complete all the objectives to get more rewards. And to be honest, it's usually not anything more than that. It's not like people are joining DS because the leadership is top notch. And I'm saying generally speaking, because again, I don't know all the intricacies. I'm just saying it's not like they're thinking in their head before they go and join the number one alliance. And let me generalize it there, where it's, the number one alliance is the best organized, the most coordinated, their leadership is top notch, they're the most professional people out there. Why would anyone want to join anyone else besides this alliance because of how great they are? That is not what's being thought of when you're thinking about joining the number one alliance. It's the latter or the former of what I mentioned. That's typically the average play or average mindset that a player is coming in with when they think about joining. And so, it's just funny to me when I see posts from that they made where it's, look, we want to unite the kingdom, we want to do all these things, when you're not really taking any form of acknowledgement or accountability for how things got there, and then trying to go forward. And maybe they did, right? Again, I'm just generally speaking from what I've seen. I haven't seen, even when I was in talks with them, there wasn't really any form of accountability for when they did things that were out of pocket or kind of going against what was agreed upon, or kind of towing that line a little bit. I mean, we showed screenshots where Z's came out and said, look, we're not recruiting anyone. But then we showed a screenshot of him directly recruiting someone after he said he wasn't recruiting anyone, right? From our group. So, to me, like I said, when you make those types of decisions and you have consistent actions, that is where you basically have lost all integrity at that point. And it's very difficult to rebuild that the moment that you've made those decisions and you do those types of things publicly. That's why if I look at Z's objectively, as specifically it pertains to being an in-game leader, I would just say this person does not appear to me to be fit to lead based on their current actions. However, remember that anyone can lead however they want, right? That's the other side of this. You can choose to do whatever you want, lead however you want, be as maniacal or be as benevolent as you want, right? That's kind of your choice for how you want to play. But if I'm just saying how I would assess it, this individual, amongst with I'm sure a few others there, just as much as I've mentioned the leadership that I talked about in the town hall for the group for the NASTi leads at one point, even I had told them, I said, look, based on what has happened and what's consistently transpired, where we've seen trends from every one of the leads, some more and some less than others, it was of my opinion that the ideal choice, one of two choices, but my preferred choice would have been to just to replace the leads, not scrap, but replace the leads and then find someone else new to fill in, because I just didn't feel that they were at that point, right, when it came to kind of maturity, competency, believing, following through, having soft skills, along with a few other things that I had seen play out. And again, we showed that in the town hall with screenshots and a few examples from some. Right, it's just, again, not everyone's kind of built to manage efficiently, effectively, and professionally. And there's a lot of factors that go into being good managers, which basically is what a leader is, and then by a lesser extent, what an officer is. And not everyone's built for that. And the challenge really can be is that sometimes it becomes a pride thing, where there's not a level of self-awareness or self-reflection or even self-recognition on knowing what your capabilities are and are not. And most of the time, in my experience, the majority of people that want to be leaders are just not qualified to be leaders in that specific moment. It doesn't mean that they can't eventually become good leaders or become eligible candidates to be leaders. It's just in most cases, from what I've seen, playing the number of kingdoms that I have across multiple kingdom builders, most people just are not at that standard or at that minimum point where they have a baseline level of foundation to say, okay, cool, now I know what I need. I've done my research, I've done my due diligence, I put my time in, I've educated myself in these areas, and now I feel like I can really go out and be a good leader, right? Or just be a leader at a minimum level. So again, that's my thing overall. It is challenging because I think the unforeseen right now in 65 is, who knows, will they have to fight multiple kingdoms and go up against multiple kingdoms? It'll definitely be a season 1+ to watch. But it is rough, because I think when you look at how DS approached everything, I mean, even if we just talk about one thing I'll say last, is even if you just look at how everything transpired in the very beginning of the kingdom, they could have reached out to me at any point in time. I think if you really look at the signs for how things played out in the very beginning, when Z's was talking with Croc and Croc was talking with Z's, and Croc would kind of give me updates here and there, it was never anything negative. It was, hey, Croc was saying I had great conversations with this player. He was nice. He would ask me questions and I would help him out, and the relationship was good. However, before things started escalating, during the fighting, and then eventually after the fighting happened, I had reached out to Z's, to Zrani, to Bob, which, as I mentioned before, Bob actually came and talked to us. And it was just kind of a difference of opinion, right? I can respect that, because at least Bob came and talked at that point. But even before everything started, when I had reached out to them before the fighting started, and then during the fighting, and then after the fighting, no one gave me the time of day from DS. And so, to me, I could almost summarize and say that basically tells me everything I need to know about their leadership, or at least those involved individuals, because I don't know if Zrani was actually a part of leadership or not, but I know Z's was. So again, man, it's rough. Like I said, I think there's things on both sides, but I do think it impacts DS a little bit more when it comes to them kind of being in the driver's seat now, and more of the responsibility and the accountability is on them when it comes to the health and the stewardship of the care for all the players in the kingdom. And so for me, that's always, again, it should always be the most important thing, is you should be looking to kind of direct, drive, and make decisions that are hopefully in the best interest of all the players. So, again, I think when you look at everything happening now, right, they basically went from having a free-for-all PvP in Zone 3, and then, you look at how things played out after that ended, and there just really wasn't anything. I don't see them organizing war games. I don't see them organizing where they're getting hundreds of people to show up. That would have actually been the case if we would have tried that first, compared to kind of the greed taking over of the want instead of need. And it was them basically, well, I want PvP, I want PvP, I want more PvP. And look, they got a lot more PvP, but now your environment is kind of scratched at that point. You kind of have to work those things back up to build on those things. And you have to think about, right, they have maybe a couple weeks, and we're talking at the earliest until Season 1 Plus comes up. What training have they done for their players? What war efforts or war game efforts have they done? Have they done sessions to actually work with players, to work on coordination, to work on communication, to work on real life scenarios that are actually going to happen in Season 1 Plus? Or is it, hey, we're just going to wing it, and we're just going to try and tear everyone's faces off regardless of how much coordination or how much organization we have, and maybe they'll just rely on one alliance or rely on two alliances, and that's it. So, like I said, those things will be interesting to see how they play out. With that in mind, that's going to be it for me. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. If there's any additional context you have or anything you want to share, I'd love to hear. These are just my thoughts on what we've seen and what we've showed, along with some of my own conclusions on kind of where things are at. But again, I'll say this, right? I always care about the players, and I wish the players, at minimum, the best going forward. Right, for anyone that's in 65, especially those that were affected in one way or another, that were not necessarily a part of leadership or management. I definitely wish those individuals, right, the best, because again, that's really what Kingdom should care about, is a player's day-to-day experience, because you don't want people to quit or leave the game, right? The idea is to try and keep as many people playing as possible, because that not only obviously helps the game and the developers, but it helps your Kingdom when it comes to being active and healthy. That's it for me. As always, until next time, I will catch you later.